During my time on this earth, I've had a few romantic relationships, good and bad. Looking back on when they all went wrong, one factor appears to be the most consistent. When I didn't think or give a f***, it was fine. As soon as I started to think too much and give too many f***s, it all went down the toilet. What is that? It's like a sudden reality shift from being super confident and at ease to becoming fearful about everything and everyone. You find yourself overthinking about every single minute detail of your actions, words and ideas. Everything keeps plundering into a dark hole and you end up so far removed from the thing you wanted or the thing you had and the person you were when you didn't care too much. You may have noticed similar things happening with your relationship and other things that are important in your life. When you don't achieve some big goal or lose a relationship or fall very short of an expectation, your ego takes a kicking and in turn it throws the toys out its pram and goes on a full-blown assault. Now your broken ego is on a mission to do everything it can to protect itself from another upset, and in turn takes you to where it wants you, deep inside yourself and completely afraid of doing anything. Now, once you're there, the uphill climb to getting your confidence back seems so daunting that you just crumble. And then your ego is won. That's overthinking. That's losing confidence. That's caring too much. It's all intertwined, and the best way to escape the shackles of loss is to master the beauty of not giving a f***. Don't give a fuck about any outcome or opinion, because the ego holds opinions in too high a regard. Though you should embrace others' opinions, but never embrace the ego's opinion, because it's mostly based on paranoid fantasy. Caring too much about what people think rather than just being yourself and improving on that is where I've stumbled and fell on my face like smash. I've always been a staunch don't give a fuck person, but some of that not giving a fuck mentality has been a shield to protect my ego. Swanning around, acting a fool, not being too considerate or mindful of others. Deep down I didn't really believe in myself, but there were those beautiful instances and periods when I truly believed in myself and I truly didn't give a flying f***. I could fake confidence and vanity and suppress modesty, and some people would believe it, but I didn't believe it. But when I was flowing with that real don't give a f*** energy, man, I was in my prime. So forget about building confidence. You need to stop giving a f*** and gain competence. So, the vast majority of you, I assume, are able to go to the bathroom all by yourself without even thinking about it. Would you say you're a confident shitter? No, but you've done it enough that you can do it anytime without any anxiety. It's down to practice and repetition. You do this stuff every day. You probably didn't do it so great when you were really young, but in time you became a toilet boss. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Keep at it, and it will become second nature. What stands in your way from trying is the fear of trying, overthinking the action until it manifests as anxiety. And anxiety cripples you to give up before you even get started. That's the ego. That's what it does. It lives inside you, and it is your enemy. It's kind of like a demonic possession, and you need to become the motherfucking exorcist. The ego highly rates all the opinions expressed by others because the ego is some jelly-spined people pleaser, constantly nodding its head in agreement to whatever twattery it hears. Don't be like the ego. Be like you. Don't live your life through the eyes of others. Just be aware of their feelings and states. You don't bow down to others and put them first and suppress everything that makes you, you. That's the ego whining in your ear like a little bitch. Bitch slap the ego by ceasing to give any degree of fucks. I mean, how valuable are most people's opinions anyway? Have you heard most people? People say lockdowns were a good idea. They'll say Africa is a country, and Ed Sheeran makes music that produces real emotions. People are ridiculous. How many times have you seen people spout out their opinion on something you know a lot about and they clearly know nothing about? Too often. You'll roll your eyes when grandma yaps on about how weed is bad for you because you have to inject it into your ankles. Grandma, you're ridiculous! But then grandma tells you you'll never make it as a long distance runner because of whatever stupid reason grandma thinks of. Grandma's right. I'm useless. Really? Why is she only right when it's about your dreams and about who you are? That's the ego. The ego doesn't care if grandma is always talking nonsense. The ego hears what it wants to hear, just like grandma. People's opinions don't matter that much because most of them aren't even their own thoughts. They're regurgitations, fueled by ego. The greatest gift I've ever had is not being sucked into a hive mind mentality. I don't follow crowds. Sometimes I deliberately go against the crowd. I'm such a strong individual. People's opinions also don't matter too much most of the time because most of us don't think about others that much. Most of our thoughts are about ourselves, and we don't really think about others. And we don't really think of others more than 10% of the time. Most of the time when people judge you, it's because they don't want to be judged. Some people will knock you down and criticize you because it makes them feel better and superior. The reality is, they too feel self-conscious, and most of their criticisms and judgments are just a reflection of their own shortcomings. So who gives a f***? You shouldn't. You improve yourself and leave them to figure out what they need to address their own stupid brain. Even when you're constantly thinking about one person, say after a breakup, you're really thinking about yourself. If someone is better off without you, you won't be constantly thinking about how better off they are. You're caught up in your feelings about how you should change and what you could have done better. The ego craves the validation of others, even if it's your ex who is clearly a psychopathic hoebag who kicks cats to death. It's all about you. If you thought just a little while about their feelings, you'd stop and realize how pointless this thinking is. You will also realize that you too are better off without them, because some people just shouldn't be together, especially nice people and cat murdering whores. Most of the time, you think and care too much about others' views of you, because they will literally have you in their head for a brief moment, and then it's back to thinking about themselves. You aren't as important as the ego makes you think you are. It's not all eyes on me, it's all eyes on I. Not giving a f*** is a superpower that has infinite potential, and once you understand the power, you'll start to see people in a very different light. Look at this man. Does he look like he gives a f***? Clearly not. If you're unfamiliar with the world of pickup artists, some of them will advise you to look like this. They look absolutely ridiculous, but this getup apparently works. That may seem insane to some of you, and it did to me, until I cracked the code. The pickup artist is mystery. Like many of his ilk, he will give you lots of strange tips and methods on how to get chicks, like systematically touching an elbow 3 times or standing with your back to a girl and talking to them over your shoulder. But these weird methods aren't the key to his success. It's how he dresses and the mindset behind that. Think about it. If you choose to dress like Boy George's low-rent tailor, and you can approach any woman without feeling even the littlest bit self-conscious, you must have high levels of not giving a fuck. You could call it confidence, but it's deeper than that. Would you walk out of your front door and enter the wide world looking like that? No. Why? Because people will laugh and point at you. That's why you lose. Because you give a fuck. Now, I'm not saying you should turn yourself into this, but let's say you had to. Then you'd have to deal with it and stop giving a fuck about what others think. If this guy can go get himself some, so can you. Stop being afraid of the unknown, because despite what the ego might tell you, everything you assume is not always reality. Just go for it. Stop giving a f***. You know, a super hot 10 will probably shoot you down. And so what? They get hassled by many suitors. They're competent at shooting people down. So who gives a f*** if you get shot down too? Maybe you're the one who doesn't get shot down. How will you know if you don't give it a try? If you don't try, you lose. Because you'll be wondering, what if? What if is the worst kind of thought. Hell, it's the worst kind of question. What if the sky fell down? Who cares? I'll deal with it when it happens. We have many instances of what ifs when we regret things. But regretting what we never tried is worse than regretting what we did try. You don't learn from not doing, and therefore you don't develop competence. So stop giving a f***.
Hello! My name is Teacher Nicole.
Now, I used to do this as a job. Cringy, innit? I had never done anything like this before. ESL jobs involve singing along and dancing and being super happy and silly for these little Chinese kids to understand some basic English. When I trained up for the role, I felt ridiculous. My first lesson, I was super anxious and I almost bottled before the class even started. I was self-conscious. I felt like a buffoon. What would people think of me now? But then I remembered how much I was getting paid. That stopped me giving a f***. Getting paid stupid money for being stupid? Who gives a f***? I stopped giving a f*** about my constructed self-image of being some kind of serious and cool person and just went with the flow. By not giving a f***, I changed my life. And a few months later, I was in sunny Thailand getting lap dances from... It was fantastic. The beauty of this job was that as soon as the kids come on camera, you had no place to hide. You just had to do it. There's a strong lesson there. Stop hiding, bite the bullet, face the fear, and don't give a f***. Now, your ego will tell you you're ridiculous, but your ego is always saying such things because it's insane. It's scared of failure and scared of success at the same time. It's a god-awful mess of an entity. Fear of failure and fear of success. It doesn't matter which one it is. They both hold you back. Fear of success may sound a little bizarre to some, but it affects many of us, and often we don't even realize it. Success means your world will change, and your ego cannot be having any of that. It fights against you. It doesn't want to adapt to change. That requires effort. Have you ever been in a situation where you want to achieve or do something that would lead to something great? You're in love with the outcome. It sounds and looks awesome. So awesome it couldn't possibly become a reality. You're about to make the move, and you hesitate because old Mr. or Mrs. Ego pipes up and tells you how terrifying this is going to be. Then you stop. Then you retreat. Once you've retreated, you feel a weird sense of comfort that nothing will change and everything will stay the familiar and the same. And it feels very nice. Your ego likes it there, and it wants you to stay there, and it will tell you anything it can to make sure that you keep living in the cycle of nothing happening. There is happiness in slavery. There is happiness in loneliness. There is happiness in dreams remaining fantasies. There is happiness in false happiness. And your worst enemy, the ego, is the one convincing you this is real happiness. You need to outwit your ego. You need to stop giving a f***. The ego is just a thought, and the ego is similar to the thoughts and opinions of others. Whether those thoughts and opinions are real or conjured up by your ego to keep you as its little slave, that doesn't matter. Either way, stop giving a fuck about them and become fearless. Fear is the mind's killer. Fear will paralyze you into not doing anything about something. But you can't just turn yourself into someone fearless, because the fear will always be there. The fear manifests and becomes reality because you end up ruminating unless you just face it. Do what scares you, and don't give a fuck when you're doing it. Because moments come and go. The scary moment only exists when you experience it. The fear is anxiety before you do it, and after it's done, it just becomes a memory. And you can't be scared of a memory, as it's already happened. So just stop giving a fuck about being scared. If it scares you, who gives a fuck? You'll just be scared, and it will pass. If it's exhausting, who gives a fuck? You'll just be exhausted, and it will pass. So how do you begin your journey to becoming someone who really doesn't give a fuck? Well, let's go back to when I was teaching the little munchkins online. When the lesson starts, that was it. You had no choice. You didn't have the choice to freeze and retreat. This is work, and it's been paid for by customers. You have no business providing them with a bad service. You just have to do it. The fact that there is an audience to engage leaves no room for being self-conscious. You could say you should always act like some people are watching and you want to show them the very best side of you. But then this kind of contradicts the point about not caring about people's opinions. You need self-discipline. It would be nice to have a motivational coach on standby all the time, but most of us can't afford that kind of luxury. Self-discipline is difficult, but it can be made easier by implementing a simple rule that you stick to. You must tell yourself you have no other choice. Just think about the very basic things you do every day that are second nature, like going to the bathroom and eating and drinking. You do these things with competence because you have repeatedly done them for a long time. But you also do those specific things because you have no choice. You have to eat. You have to drink. You have to go to the bathroom. If you don't, then you're in trouble. You have to program yourself to stop giving a fuck and go head to head with what you fear, because you have no choice. This is what is similar to what is called the death ground. Sounds hardcore, don't it? Well, it is. Now, the death ground is where you put yourself into a situation where you have no choice but to take action because the stakes are too high. The concept is from the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. One example talks about how some guy named Herman Cortez, who headed up an expedition to Mexico in 1519, who had a plan, and it was basically to conquer Mexico. But the 500 or so soldiers he had with him weren't so keen on his high ambition, and weren't so keen on him neither. Also, 500 men had to go against 500,000 Aztecs. This seemed like a no-brainer. But Cortez didn't give a f***. All the soldiers wanted to do was head back to Spain with the riches they had collected and chill with their families. They had no motivation to go on a mad mission to fight 500,000 Aztec nutters. To cut this story even shorter, Cortez ended up sinking all of the ships that were to take him and his men back to Spain. This left them with little options. This was called the no-return tactic, and it's a beauty. The soldiers used the ships as a fallback safety net, basically. This is like hiding away and retreating deep into yourself when confronted with challenges that your ego doesn't like. The ships were there for the soldiers to feel at ease. If it got too tough, they could just run away. Cortez realized that without this safety net, the soldiers would be faced with a dilemma that only had one way out. The soldiers had little choice but to go ahead and take on the Aztecs, as they had no other option. The fact that they were outnumbered by about 1,000 to 1 made them fiercer and fight harder, because they had nothing else to lose and everything to gain. Put yourself in the death ground. Look at the future where you did nothing and fear that rather than fearing the infinite possibilities and outcomes of just going ahead and doing something that scares you but might change your life for the better. Stop giving a fuck about your ego's opinions. You take one step forward and tell yourself, I have no choice but to do this now. When your ego tries a second attempt at sabotage, tell it, I don't give a f***. Rinse and repeat. Your ego will always be there to slap you down, but the more consistently stern you are with it, the easier it will become. The elation and buzz you will get from confronting your fears will become addictive, and eventually, it'll be like your second nature. Just remember, your ego is always going to try to sabotage you. So remember, when you see the person of your dreams, and you want to take a shot, do it. You don't have a choice. Your ego will tell you, you're going to embarrass yourself, and you tell it, I don't give a f***. Or it will tell you, what on earth are you going to say? And you tell it, I don't give a f***. Or it might scream at you, what's the point? You know you'll be disappointed, and you tell it, I don't give a f***. Whatever it is, you have no choice. And you tell the ego, I don't give a f***. Go get the job of your dreams. The ego says, you're an imposter, what are you thinking? I don't give a f***. Go start that project or business. The ego says, people will think you're stupid. I don't give a f***. I'm gonna get ripped. The ego says, but you'll have to make effort. You can't commit. Thanks, but I don't give a f*** what you say. I don't give a f***. And so on, and so on, and so on. There is, of course, always a reversal and flip side to anything. So you must remember that not giving a f*** has its limits and a time and a place. You just need common sense and empathy to make sure that your don't give a f*** mindset doesn't go too crazy. Don't approach a widow at her husband's funeral. Don't wander around in a pair of arseless chaps in a residential area. Don't just bound your way into any situation without reading it first. Don't try and fight 10 trained killers because you don't give a f***. You really ought to give a f*** about that. Not caring what people think can only go so far. Remember that though offending people isn't the end of the world, and can be very fun, always remember to be respectful and considerate towards other people. My don't give a f*** nature has sometimes been a detriment because I just didn't consider people's feelings when it actually matters. You can't just be a tone-deaf rebel for the sake of it. It may be funny to shout obscenities in a crowded room because you don't give a f***, but some people are just trying to have a pleasant experience, and you're ruining it. Give a f*** when you're supposed to. Have enough self-awareness and empathy to know when and where it is appropriate. Self-awareness and empathy is another set of skills you should master, so you should have a look into that. You must also know the difference between overthinking and critical thinking. Overthinking is when you drive yourself mad by thinking about too much pointless stuff, or continuously going over a scenario, thought or idea over and over without ever reaching any sensible conclusion. I have often been the victim of overthinking and been told not to think too much because I do it too much. But on the flip side, I've always thought that too many people don't f***ing think enough. It's all a balancing act, and one you can master. Sometimes you can't just balls into a situation to overcome fear. You may need to think carefully about a situation, first by observing it critically without emotion. Fear has its place. It's a useful emotion to keep us safe. It's that you shouldn't try to let it rule your life and guide all your decisions. Life is full of risk and reward. You got to assess it properly by thinking clearly without being governed by fears, insecurities, and other overpowering emotions, and the ego. If the reward is worth the risk, then go for it, because too often we are held back because we refuse to take minor risks, like rejection, a little embarrassment, or freezing up and not knowing what to say. These little downfalls are nothing compared to staring at a ceiling on your deathbed, consumed by regret. We all look back on things we regret, the things we didn't do, and the things we did do. Well, that's to learn from, so start learning. Look into the future and think about what you want it to be like, and think about what you might wish you had done right now, and what you wish you hadn't done. Then do the things you wish, and stop doing the things you regret. Now, the world contains too many miserable people who are just plain haters, and that includes you, because you, like me, have an ego. Stop beating yourself down, stop beating other people down, leave them to it. Whatever people do, as long as it doesn't pose an actual threat to your well-being, it's fine. We can make this a better place by giving just a little less f***s in life. Now leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to my website. Or don't. I'm okay. I don't give a f***. I'm happy either way, and so should you.